This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Debate. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
On Thursday, the Prime Minister admitted he's not worth the cost. He found out that I was holding a monster rally in a Liberal stronghold, and he panicked. His phones lit up as Atlantic Canadian Liberal MPs, bawling their eyes out, pleaded with him to relent to the pressure that the Leader of the Opposition was mounting to axe the tax. Prime Minister said he was stiff in spine and he would never back down. And the Liberal MPs from the Atlantic Caucus said, well, then we'll oust you as leader and you'll lose your job. How will that do for your ego? Prime Minister said, in that case, we'll pull together a press conference this afternoon. We'll try to time it right before the Conservative leader's great rally in Windsor, where 1,000 people were scheduled to rise up against the tax, and we'll promise to pause the tax until after the election. So now Atlantic Canadians know that if they elect this Prime Minister, they will get a massive tax hike on their home heating oil, and if they elect the common sense Conservatives, they will have tax-free heat. Pretty simple choice. Simple choice. The Prime Minister has just defined the issue of the next election. Vote for him and have a massive home heating tax. Vote for common sense Conservatives, and we will axe the tax for everyone and forever. What do you think, Mr. Speaker? Who would you vote for? But he sent out one of his Newfoundland MPs to say that the reason why only some Canadians were getting a pause on the carbon tax is because other Canadians didn't vote Liberal. So soon they'll have a new income tax rate for provinces that don't elect Liberal MPs, a new sales tax rate, new tax rates everywhere else. But the problem with this bloody-minded divide and conquer tax strategy is that some Liberals seem to have failed to win over the Prime Minister's heart. The Liberal MP for Sudbury has not got a carbon tax exemption. The two Liberal MPs in Thunder Bay, a very cold climate, they don't get a carbon tax exemption. The Liberal MP for Nickel Belt did not get a carbon tax exemption in those harsh, cold Northern Ontario communities that use gas and propane. The Liberal, extremely ineffective Liberal MP for Edmonton Centre has not got a carbon tax exemption. The loquacious and loud and never quiet member from Winnipeg over here, they call it Winterpeg, cold in Winnipeg, and yet the Liberal, what is this riding again? Winnipeg North. Winnipeg North, a man of many words but few actions, has failed to get a carbon tax exemption for Winnipeggers. Apparently, those people are forced to pay higher prices for their heat because their MPs are so ineffective that they could not mount pressure on the Prime Minister to back down. Mr. Speaker, it is proof that he's not worth the cost, just like he has not been worth the cost for housing. After 8 years, this Prime Minister has doubled mortgage payments, doubled the rent, doubled the needed down payment for a home. Let's just review the housing hell he has caused since he promised to lower housing costs. Let's go through it. It now takes 25 years for to save up for a down payment in Toronto. Before this Prime Minister, you could pay off a mortgage in that time. Families are now stretching out their mortgage terms to 90 and 120 years because interest rates on their exorbitant mortgages have stretched out the amortization. That means that not only, you used to pay off your entire mortgage by 25 years in, and then you could retire mortgage free. Now, not only will you never be able to pay off your mortgage in your entire lifetime, even if you hand the house and the mortgage to your kids, they might not be able to pay it off in their lifetime. They would then have to hand the house to a third generation who would still inherit a mortgage. So much for the government taking on debt so that Canadians don't have to. Under this Prime Minister, homes cost 50% more than they do in the United States, and you can buy a castle in Sweden for the price of a two-bedroom in Kitchener. Toronto is now ranked the worst worst housing bubble in the world by UBS Bank. Vancouver is the the third most unaffordable housing market on earth when you compare housing costs to income, and Toronto is the 10th. Vancouver is now more unaffordable than New York, London, England, Singapore. Singapore being a tiny island with 2,000 times more people per square kilometer than Canada. Canada should be the cheapest place in the world, Mr. Speaker, because of course we have more land per person than all but 4 countries on the planet. In other words, we have lots of space, just not a lot of homes. In fact, we have fewer homes per capita than all other G7 countries, even though we have by far the most land to build on. And in fact, we have fewer homes per capita today than we did 8 years ago when this Prime Minister took office promising more homes and more affordable homes. And if you want the best all-in-one measurement of this Prime Minister's performance on housing, look at the OECD, which compared housing costs to income starting in 2015 to present among all 37 OECD countries. So how have the ratio of home prices to family incomes grown in Canada relative to the other 36 OECD countries? We are the second worst. In other words, housing costs outgrew incomes in Canada at a faster pace than in all but one of the other 36 OECD countries. In other words, this is a new problem that occurred after this Prime Minister took office, and it is a problem that is unique to Canada. He cannot blame some prior government, and he cannot blame other countries, because he is worse than Canada has ever been, and worse than almost anywhere else in the world. This is a made-in-Canada problem, unique to this Prime Minister. Why? Because he has spent the last 8 years building bureaucracy rather than building homes. He brags that he has the most expensive housing programs. He complains that when I was housing minister, my programs did not cost as much. And he is absolutely right about that. I had far more affordable housing programs. In fact, there were far few billions in my housing programs than there are in his programs. But we don't measure the success by how expensive we can be. We measure success by how affordable we can be. He even made up a fact. He looked at a CBC headline, which is always a dangerous thing to do. And he said that when I was minister that we only built 99 homes with $300 million. I said, what the heck is he talking about? I have a mind like a steel trap. I would have remembered if I'd announced a $300 million housing program. So I checked into it. But here's what actually happened. First of all, the program was created in 2008, a half decade before I even became the minister. Second of all, it didn't spend any money. The program was designed to encourage private home ownership by First Nations. It invested capital of $300 million and didn't spend a penny because the money was invested commercially. It actually grew to $380 million, and it wasn't 99 homes. There were 7,000 homes built, purchased, or renovated for First Nations people. So it didn't cost any money. It made a profit, and it built, renovated, and bought 7,000 homes. Oh, and by the way, the entire thing is run by First Nations themselves. No wonder the Liberals don't like any of that, Mr. Speaker. But forget the facts. If I had to deal with their body of facts in litigating the housing file, boy, I don't know what I would do. You might have to hallucinate to come up with some other facts, too. I might even get desperate enough to read CBC headlines as well. But, Mr. Speaker, in the meantime, let's talk about a real common sense plan to bring homes Canadians can afford. Let's talk about my bill, the Building Homes, Not Bureaucracies Act. Now, principle number one, it will require cities boost home completions by 15% per year, or they'll lose federal infrastructure money. We give them $5 billion a year in direct transfers. They can pretty much do whatever they want with that money. I'm saying this is going to be a housing incentive. We're going to start paying city bureaucrats the way real estate agents get paid, on volume. You get housing completed, you get more money. You don't get it completed, you get less money. So the bureaucrats will have to wake up every morning and say, how can we approve as many permits as quickly as possible so Canadians have a place to live? And it's going to be very mathematical. I'll require you hit 15% more home building per year. If you beat that by, say, 10%, you get 10% more money. You miss it by 10%, you get 10% less money. Maybe then the bureaucrats will wake up, and the mayors will wake up every day and say, how can we get this done quickly? Mayors would then be forced to move their offices right into the permitting room, have a big open room. You imagine that with big screens that say permitting times would be on one wall. Number of homes waiting. How many people are on hold right now? How many homes are being held up? Imagine if you had big screens in the city hall and all the bureaucrats were busy motoring away trying to get to yes and get things done. Wouldn't that be incredible if we actually focused on results rather than building more bureaucracy, Mr. Speaker? That's what my bill will incentivize. Right now, by contrast, the current housing minister has come up with a program. It works very simple. He calls up the mayor. He says, everyone knows housing is hell after 8 years of our government. Can I come to town and take credit for homes you were already going to build, and I'll write you a big check if you do it? So he shows up, the city says, yeah, there was already a subdivision going in over there. Let's give the minister credit for that, and in exchange he'll stroke a big check for $40 million with which we can build more bureaucracy. And then the bureaucrats will be happy, the politicians will be happy, and everyone else will be miserable. And so that's what he's been doing. We know that this is not leading to more housing construction because housing starts this year are down 9%. So yes, he can show up and say, oh, look at these 24,000 homes that were already going to be built. But the overall housing starts, the number of shovels put into ground, down 9%. 2 years after this so-called housing accelerator was created, not a single solitary new house has been completed. A $4 billion housing program that doesn't build housing. My plan creates a strict mathematical formula that pays for results. Second principle, we're going to require every federally funded transit station be surrounded by housing, so that you can live right next to the bus or train. Countless stations that I've been to right across this country they don't have housing. In fact, in Winnipeg, the gatekeepers there actually stepped in to block 2,000 new homes right next to a transit station that was built for those homes. They had to get slapped down in the courts, and what did the Liberals do? They gave more money to the incompetent politicians at Winnipeg City Hall to block housing for the people who need it. Well, I'm going to put all the federal funds for transit stations into a trust, and the city will not get the money for the transit station until there are apartments occupied all around the station. And that way, they will have to hurry up and approve the housing if they want to get the money. We will again pay for results. Next, this bill will require that the federal minister of public works do a full inventory and come to this house within months to announce all all of the buildings that will be sold in order to build housing. The Prime Minister promised this 8 years ago. And in 8 years, with all the 37,000 federal buildings and 6.2 million square meters of office space, and the thousands of acres, how many homes has he managed to build on federal land and in federal buildings? How many? I asked him, don't worry, he didn't know either. 13. Not 13,000, not 1,300, 13. My bill will make it mandatory by law that the minister come here with a plan to sell off 15% of all federal buildings, thousands of acres of federal land, so that we can build on that land that's being used for nothing. And federal bureaucrats, on the fourth principle, are going to have to get their act together as well. I was speaking with a builder who builds beautiful, environmentally friendly homes and apartments in Atlantic Canada. He's in the process of building a carbon neutral home right now. It'll be the greenest apartment complex in the world. He had to wait 2 years for CMHC to approve the financing on that home. The benchmark is supposed to be 60 days. So here's how life is going to work around here when I'm Prime Minister. And in this bill, the CMHC bureaucrats will have to hit the 60-day target within 6 months. If they don't, I'm cutting their pay in half. And if they don't do it within a year, I'm firing the entire executive. It's right in the bill. That's life. You're a barber, you don't cut hair well, you get fired. If you're a mechanic and the engine block falls out, you get fired. In the real world, when people don't do their job, they don't get bonuses. That's how life works under this Prime Minister for the senior six-figure bureaucracy. This bill puts an end for that. We're going to pay for results, not for bureaucracy and the privilege of incompetent bureaucrats who make life miserable and costly for everyone else. Mr. Speaker, the Building Homes Not Bureaucracy Act is common sense. The common sense of the common people united for our common home. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for his speech. And I think he left out of his speech that under his watch as the so-called housing minister, 800,000 fewer units of affordable housing, Mr. Speaker. But my question for him is, why go to war with mayors over infrastructure? Infrastructure is the key to getting more houses built. Why would he cut that? Inevitably, he'll see fewer homes getting built.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This will have to be a case for unsolved mysteries. He claims that when I was minister, there were 800,000 homes that went missing. Like, what happened to them? The aliens from outer space came and just plucked these homes, and they went up. And when we go around, what's remained? Are the basements still there? Like, where did they go? These guys are unbelievable. It sounds like he's having an LSD flashback or something, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about when I was housing minister. Rent cost half as much, cost $950 to rent the average one bedroom. Now it's just about $2,000. The average mortgage payment on a newly purchased average home was $1,400. Now it's $3,500, an increase of 150%. And the average down payment was a very modest $20,000. That was my record. And we're not proposing to cut infrastructure money. We're proposing to link in dollars for cities to the number of homes that our bureaucrats and mayors allow to be completed. It is an incentive. Those that build more homes will get more money. That's the real world. That's common sense. Let's bring it home.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell the Leader of the Conservatives exactly what happened to those 800,000 units. The rent went up from $750 a month to over $2,000. That's what happened. That's where those 800,000 units went. That's how the Conservatives lost the affordable rental apartments for people that need them. Right now, in this bill that the member has put forward, guess what? There is zero mention of social housing or the need. The Conservative leader talked about Singapore. They have 80% social housing. What does Canada have? 3.5%. The Conservatives cut the co-op program. They gutted social housing. That's why we have this crisis. Why are they not supporting communities in building social housing and co-op housing?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
More homes and more affordable homes. They don't want nationalized government-controlled homes, Mr. Speaker. Now, when I was minister, the average rent was $950. Now it's over $2,000 under this NDP Liberal government. When I was minister, the average mortgage payment on a average newly purchased house was $1,400. Now it is $3,500. Housing was not just affordable, it was cheap when I was minister, and Canadians could afford to buy a house. Now, under the NDP government in BC, BC is probably the most unaffordable housing market in the world. We've tried the Soviet-style experiment in the NDP's heartland of BC, the BC government, and we know the result. It is pain, it is misery, it is tent cities. We don't need a Soviet-style takeover of housing. We need Canadians to have the chance to own their own homes, and that's what they will have when I'm Prime Minister.